Hello everyone, I'm Jonathan Little. Today, we're going to be discussing how to play GTO with pocket aces. Pocket aces is a hand that many people think is easy. Just re-raise and get the money in. Bet and jam the money in. And quite often, that is true. But we're going to use Peak GTO, our new trainer at pokercoaching.com, to go through and show that usually you should just be re-raising, pre-flop, and getting the money in. But sometimes you shouldn't. And also, we're going to go through a few spots after the flop where you did not just re-raise and blast the money in to show how you should play in some relatively tricky spots that I think a lot of people may mess up. I want to thank all of you for being here with me today. Let's get right started. We will be using Peak GTO, like I said. We have the library and the trainer. We're going to be using these a ton today. Here is the library. First things first, we're going to be looking at tournaments today. You can also go look at cash games. You'll see that you re-raise aces all the time. In tournaments, though, with deep stacks, let's take a look at this spot. Say, under the gun raises, and we're next with aces. We re-raise. If we're next with aces, we re-raise. Next, re-raise, 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 re-raise. Every single spot, you re-raise the aces when you're deep stacked. Cool, nice and easy. What about if the cutoff raises and you're on the button? You re-raise. What about small blind? You re-raise. Okay, fine, good. What about if the button raises and you're in the small blind? Do you ever slow play? No. You re-raise. What about the big blind? No. You re-raise. What if it folds around to you in the small blind? Ooh, some interesting stuff here. Now, so far, we've looked at all the earlier positions. If they fold you raise, and if someone raises, you re-raise. Easy. When they fold to you in the small blind, though, things start to get a little bit interesting. You do a lot of limping with your whole range when you're playing very deep stacked. Are we all the way on the screen? We are not. Let me shrink this. You all got to tell me if I'm not on the screen. Sometimes I screw it up. Okay. Take a look here. We limp with the aces a lot, as we do with everything else. This is a spot where I actually limp with my entire range the majority of the time against most people if I think they're aggressive at all. Because when you limp and they raise, as they will do, I think most people are aware of this range structure when you're deep stacked that you should be raising. What do we do with our aces then? What do you think? Oh, did I click the wrong thing? Call, raise. Oh my gosh, I am on the wrong thing. Let's take a look at 60 big blinds. Call, raise. Here we go. Now, with our aces, we re-raise when we're playing deep stacked at all. So if we limp the aces from the small blind and get raised, we re-raise. So they make it, or we limp, they make it 3.5 or something. We make it something like 10.5 with a good strong linear range of value hands plus mostly blocker bluffs and hands that flop well enough over here. That's it. That's all you need to know for deep stack poker. Raise it from every position except for the small blind, in which case you limp it, and then limp, re-raise it. If you do limp, re-raise it, and they call, well, you go to the flop. Notice here, by the way, if the small blind limps and you have pocket aces, you raise. If they re-raise, you slow play. Why are we seeing slow plays in this spot? Well, as we get shallower and shallower in relation to the pot, you don't mind seeing the flop, especially in position. And essentially, you just don't need to re-raise and build a pot at this point, because if you do, rip it all in, your opponent's going to fold all their garbage. And you want to keep them in the pot with all this junk. Now, a lot of people get it in their heads that they really don't want to get outdrawn. So when they get limp re-raise and they have aces, they just load it in from the big blind. They think, all right, let's make a point to not get outdrawn. Easy peasy. But that is actually a pretty big mistake. You don't want to be making pretty big mistakes in these scenarios. Okay, so this is a spot where you would call and see the flop. This is going to all hold true. We're playing something like 30 big blinds or more. What I want to take a look at now is 25 big blinds deep. This is where things start to get a little bit interesting. Let's say under the gun raises. Take a look at pocket aces now. Now, once stacks get shallow to something like 25 big blinds or shorter, when you're facing a raise, and you want to have any other calling range, as we do here with all these hands in green, you're going to want to call your aces some portion of the time. What about in the low jack seat? Calling with aces about half the time. What about hijack? Calling aces some, cutoff calling aces some, button calling aces some, small blind, no, re-raise. And from the big blind, re-raise as well, because you're out of position. From out of position, you just want to re-raise with your best hands. All right, what about if, let's say, the low jack raises? Notice again, hijack calls, cutoff calls, button calls. Small blind re-raises, big blind re-raises. This is kind of similar to if you raise over limp blind versus blind and you get limp re-raised, you can call in position and go from there because the stacks are starting to get shallow. Here's another spot where stacks are going to start to get shallow, and you need to be very, very, very aware of how to play this spot. And if anything, say low jack raises and you're on the button, this is a spot where I'm probably going to call aces every time. And notice this wide calling range. A lot of people think 25 big blinds deep. When somebody raises, your options are all in or fold. But take a look. Take a look at GTO. That is not the case at all. You should be doing a ton of calling. What if we're shallower stacked? Let's say 20 big blinds. And the hijack raises. We're on the button. Aces calls every single time. As does kings. Almost every time. And why are we calling aces and some kings? It's because we want to have a calling range in a spot that flops decently well. If you only go all in or fold, you are making a pretty big mistake. Notice, you're calling about 10% of hands, going all in with about 10% of hands. This is a spot where if you only rip it in, you're making a big mistake. What are the positions? It says it right here. Hijack raises, and we're on the button. What are our stacks? It says it right here. 20 big blinds. What is the action preflop? It says it right here. There's a raise. And then the cutoff folds, and now it's on us on the button. In the cutoff, you would also just call. 20 big blinds deep, facing a raise. Again, you do a decent chunk of calling. What about if we are shallower? Let's go down here to 15 big blinds. Under the gun raises. Now, we don't really have a calling range, and because we don't have a calling range, we don't slow play aces. However, on the button, you do want to have a calling range. On the button, you do still want to have a calling range 15 big blinds deep, so specifically on the button, you get to call. You don't get to call at 15 big blinds deep from the earlier position, because if you call and it get jammed, it's pretty rough with a lot of these hands. So you'd rather just jam them yourself. If it folds to you in the small blind, I would recommend just not slow playing here. It's a tiny frequency. And from the big blind, I would probably slow play a decent chunk of the time because you want to be able to call very wide in the big blind. Essentially, as your calling range gets wider in a particular spot with a shallow stack, you are going to want to be slow playing your aces. What if we're even shallower? Let's look at 12 big blinds. Now, we just saw 15 big blinds deep when under the gun raises, and you're in the hijack seat, you never call. Is that going to hold true? What do you think? We saw some patterns. Very deep stack, you always 3-bet. As you get shallower, like really shallow, you also stop calling. So under the gun +1, call. Low jack, all shoves. Low jack, all shoves. Hijack, all shoves. Cutoff, all shoves. Button, we still do call. Because we still do want to call a little bit. Now, I just showed 25 big blinds deep. You want to be calling a ton. On the button, 12 big blinds deep, you don't really want to do a whole lot of calling. If you told me you really did not want to have a calling range here, I don't think it's the end of the world. That said, I still would, but I'm trying to play as well as I can. This is a spot where I probably would have a calling range, and that includes aces. So, against a raise, 25 big blinds or shorter on the button with aces, you do a lot of calling in all scenarios. In the small blind, you do want to have a calling range. I would sneak in the aces now, and also from the big blind, I would sneak in the aces. So, as you see here, we are sneaking in calls with aces a lot when we are shallow stacked. You satellite into the mini main in the Bahamas. Congrats, I'll see you there. You're mainly a cash game player. You're doing peak drills. Do you think that this tournament will have an okay field? I think the tournament will be super soft and very good. I think if you are a good cash game player, you will be perfectly fine. Definitely, if you can, go through the tournament masterclass on pokercoaching.com. I know you don't have a whole lot of time, but I think the tournament masterclass would be very beneficial for you. Do we make a discount for poker coaching monthly? Probably not. That said, check out pokercoaching.com/CyberMonday. That is what we have on sale right now. All right, so what I want to look at first is 25 big blinds deep when, let's say, what do you want to do? Let's say it folds to you. Let's say the small blind, what am I saying? Folds around to the small blind raises. And we have aces. Notice aces just calls. So this is a spot where it folds to the small blind, 25 big blinds deep, they make it 3 big blinds. With this range, a decently wide raising range. Remember, playing very deep stack, they actually should not raise very often at all because they're out of position, and that's really bad for them. Here, this is a spot where we are going to raise a decent amount from the small line just to push our equity and get pre-flop folds with the junk. And we always call the aces. So let's go over here to the trainer. Whenever you load up the Peak GTO trainer, it's just right here at the top of the page. You click on full hand, tournament, 8 max, 1 big blind ante, big blind versus the small blind. Let's do 25 big blinds deep versus a raise first in. And then come over here and click on your hand and click aces. Then we click start. All right, here we have it. It's going to fold around to the small blind. They're going to raise. What do we do with our aces? Well, hopefully, you already know the answer. The answer is to call. 25 big blinds deep here. As you see, we call aces every single time. We call every other hand in green. We shove the hands in red. If this chart's unfamiliar to you, you need to study. You should know. In this scenario, assuming your opponent plays well, this is roughly what you should do. Now, if your opponent does not play well, you always want to adjust to whatever they are doing incorrectly. So, if they raise too many strong hands, maybe you just want to re-raise the aces then, even though there is no small re-raising range. Maybe you want to, well, you're still going to want to call it. But if your opponent's range is too garbage, you're not going to change. You're just going to check your aces and see the flop. Or you're just going to call and see the flop, right? So this is a spot where really I don't think you need to get too crazy unless you think your opponent's raising very wide. But if they're raising very wide, you still want to slow play the aces because you want to keep them in with all the garbage. All right. So what are we going to do? We're going to call the aces every single time in this drill today. We call. By the way, check out our ELO. Hopefully we can increase it. We're at 1823. As soon as I say I'm going to try to increase my ELO, I'm sure I'm going to get every single hand wrong. All right, flop comes Queen Jack 3. This is a rating to show how good you are. And eventually we're going to have a stats page up. It's going to show how you do compared to other people. It's going to show how your ELO rating is increasing or decreasing. It's going to show if you're getting better at poker or not. All right, they bet 1.9 big blinds. What should we do? We're going to go over some multi-way spots in and out of position. Re-raise. Raise and re-raise and re-raise the aces. They bet flop. Do we raise or call? I could be convinced raising is fine here, but I think calling is probably ideal. Call 97% of the time, raise every once in a while. Basically never. You're going to find against a bet on the flop, you don't do a whole lot of raising with aces. You may say, on Queen Jack 3, there's a flush draw. Aren't we scared? No. The opponent's range is decently wide, and they're going to have a lot of garbage. I mean, yeah, they could have some good hands. Let's take a look at what their range looks like again. Folds around to them. This is what they're raising with. On Queen Jack 3, yes, they have some queens. Yes, they have some jacks. But in reality, they have a whole lot of nothing too. Notice here, they have a bunch of low nonsense. They have a bunch of offsuit nonsense, right? This is a spot where we essentially just have to call a ton. So we call on the turn. Now we have to decide how much to bet. I think on this very dynamic board, we should be using a larger size, like 6.8. If the board was way more uncoordinated, maybe we bet small. Let's go 6.8, 62% of the time. And that's the end of the hand. You can actually scroll down here. Looks like I got to make it a little bit wider for this. Oh, no, it's over here. You can click right here, and now you can study this spot in the trainer. Hopefully it works. Sometimes whenever we are streaming live, inevitably the internet decides to not work for me, but it looks like it will today. All right. What I want to know is on the turn, when they check, should we ever check it back with our aces? And take a look at this. This is something a lot of people get wrong. They think with aces, you just have to load the money in. And I will say, I, Jonathan Little, have this problem. With the aces, on the Queen, Jack, 3, 7, 2 diamonds, when I have no diamond, I'm thinking, let's get our money in. So I have recognized from playing in this spot, in the trainer, I probably bet a little bit too often. Now look, we are betting decently often. I knew we would be betting with the ones without the diamond more than the ones with the diamond. As you see, the ones without the diamond are betting more often. But I presumed we were betting almost every time. And that's not right? Like with our aces, half the time we're checking. So even though I got the answer, quote unquote, right, I would have been a little bit off here in game. All right, let's take a look at another one. They raise, we call. Can we go through different spots and all sorts of configurations? Yes, you can use Peak to do this. Flop comes Jack 5, 3. All right, I think this board is so uncoordinated to the point that we might want to check it a decent amount of the time. Again, whenever it's multi-way, raise and re-raise. Raise and re-raise. Raise and re-raise your aces. So it's either we check or bet small. I'm going to go with check this time. 54% check, 45% bet small. Good, right? Turns a 9. They check. So here, I think we want to just start getting money in, right? And the problem is if we bet tiny now, we're not going to be able to jam the river all in. We are trying to get all in, by the way. 25 big blinds deep. We're trying to get our money in. We're not trying to pot control or not lose all of our stack when we happen to be beat. On the turn, I think we need to go 4.6 most of the time. This may, again, be a turn that's so uncoordinated that we can just check it back. So I'm not exactly sure which way it's going to go here. I'm going to go 4.6, though. And it looks like I'm wrong. It looks like it wants to pot it. All right. I would not have potted it here. This is a spot where I would have made a mistake. River's a 7. They check, obviously, all in. So what I want to look at on the turn is what does the range look like on the turn? Because I would have messed that up. I would have bet a little bit too small, apparently. If there was a flush draw, I know we should be betting bigger. I think we should be betting bigger. Without a flush draw, though, take a look at this. Right here on the turn. We are doing a lot of 4.6 big blind betting. Okay, so look, this is a spot where if you were to look at the solver, you may say that, like, I made a mistake, right? A mistake. I, in this scenario, would not have had two bet sizes of pot and 4 point. I would not have had these 4 bet sizes. I, Jonathan Little, would have had 4.6 big blinds only on the turn. And if you use exactly this strategy of betting only 4.6 big blinds, you're going to lose a little bit of EV. But it's going to be way easier to implement than trying to split the range into this strategy and this strategy. Like, notice, Kings does a lot of small betting. Aces does a lot of big betting. Good luck figuring that out and trying to remember all of that in game. I would recommend 4.6, call it a day. So I don't feel so bad about, quote unquote, missing that one. I think that's perfectly fine. All right, let's keep going. Small blind raises. Here we are. They bet big on 10-10-5. All right, obviously call, never raise. Whenever they bet the flop, you basically never raise. They shove turn, easy call. Okay, that's an easy one. All right, let's try again. They raise small blind, we call. And as you see, we set up this spot pre-flop. So we're always going to be in this spot pre-flop. We're going to go to the flop. We're going to be in position. Here we go. Okay, Jack 8-2. Do we ever raise this flop? What do you think? Type it in the comment section. While you're here, by the way, click the like button, click the subscribe button, click the notification bell, do all of that. I'd appreciate it. I think, even though the board's very draw heavy, I think we still just call. I don't know, though. Let's see. Call 99.55% of the time. So, some of you in the chat, I already see you typing it in, said you would have raised. And I don't think we do a lot of raising against the big bet on the flop. We're going to look at it in just a second. Does it matter if we have the ace of hearts? I don't know. We're about to see. I would have slow played. Obviously on the turn we call. Nothing to see there. Okay. Let's take a look at the spot in the library. So what we want to know is on the flop, do we ever raise? And I would venture to say probably not a lot. But maybe we do shove with some, like, top pairs. So they bet flop. What are they betting the flop with? Big. Notice they don't use a whole lot of big bets. It's going to be very polarized, right? Kings, queens, some jacks, flush draws, etc. So they bet big. Notice we do almost no raising, as expected. So how did I know we do almost no raising here? Well, their range to bet the flop, very big, is very polarized, right? We just saw when they bet the flop big, it's with pretty good stuff, right? Top pairs, over pairs, high equity draws, and junk. So when they bet big, with a polarized range, you really don't do very much raising. You may say, oh, we're raising some, I see it. It's about 3.5% of your range. It's almost none. So in this spot, I would not raise anything. Notice aces, calls every time. Kings, calls every time. Everything calls every time, pretty much, except for some queen high flush draws, which obviously have great equity and can get a lot of better hands to fold, and some Jack 9 and Ace Jack. Like not a whole lot to see here. So this is a spot where if you raise the flop, you would have made a pretty big mistake. Now, how would you possibly know that unless you studied? Well, you could be guessing, and some of you will have guessed right. But if you don't study, you're not going to definitively know this. And now you all know how to play this spot, and that's going to be very beneficial for you. When they do bet and we do call, and the turn brings the 4 of hearts, notice they should do a lot of shoving because their flop polarized betting range is still very strong here. They have a lot of flushes, they have a lot of top pairs, and they have a lot of, with their bluffs, stuff like King 10 with the King of Hearts or the 10 of Hearts, right? So it makes sense for these to be jamming with the King of Hearts or the other card for the heart. So they have a lot of draws and good strong hands, so they keep betting the turn a lot. Obviously, aces calls, all of our jacks are going to call. 10s, 9s with a heart call. Without a heart, they fold, mostly. Ace of hearts, like by itself, calls. King of hearts by itself calls. Was the stack to pot ratio a big reason we're not raising? In general, facing a big bet, you just don't do a lot of raising. But yes, that is going to be the case. Again, you can go through Peak GTO and play around with this. Just joined the website and you're enjoying it. Good, glad to hear it. All right, let's go through one more hand here. You all want to look at some spots where they do a lot of raising and calling. Flop comes, King 9, 7. Small, I guess. It's either small or medium. I don't think this is one we want to check on. I think it's probably a little too coordinated to do a whole lot of checking. Maybe it is just... I don't know what you're supposed to do here. I'm going to go small. 59% small, 30% checking. Okay? I want to go to the river. Queen Jack 4, they bet big. All right, what do you think we should do here, facing the big bet? By the way, big is 2/3 pot, okay? You don't do a whole lot of potting it or over potting it. At least on the early betting rounds when you're shallow stacked. Easy call, I presume. Call 99%. You don't know how to play this. You only play cash games. Well, fortunately for you, we have the Peak GTO trainer. It also has cash games. They check turn. Do we bet, small, or jam? Or do we check it? This might be a check spot. I think if the board was more uncoordinated, we should probably check. But I think on this board, we probably want to bet. I think we're supposed to bet small, but it feels kind of rough. Let's go small. 84% small. Good. A little bit of checking. They raise, we call. King, King 6. They check. All right, on paired boards, you should do some checking with aces. A lot of people literally never check the aces. I think this is a spot where we probably do want to have some checks. I would rather... Does it matter if we have the club? I think I'd rather check back the ace of clubs, but I don't think it matters. Let's say check this time and see what develops. Check 90% of the time. How did we know to check the paired boards 90% of the time? Not all paired boards, but, some. The answer is we studied. Jonathan Lola spent some time studying poker. Would you believe it? All right, they bet turn. Do we raise? What do you think? The best style of play for low stakes is just super tight. Wait for the nuts and take your opponent to value town. It's like Chat GPT in the chat box is typing random stuff today. The opponent raises and 6 people call. What do you do? It's like, come on, Chat GPT, get out of here. All right. I think we just call. Even though a lot of people are tempted to raise. The problem is if we raise and get called, we're just dead, right? By calling, you keep your opponent in with all of their nothing. 99% call. You really want them in with their nothing. But what if a club comes? What if a club comes? Who cares? All right. River is a 7. They bet small. Can we value raise? We're obviously not folding. So I think this is probably just a call. It's so easy to be beat here. Although maybe in GTO world you shove. But if you're shoving in GTO world, you're expecting to get called by a whole lot of garbage. It does shove. Oh, we screwed up. Let's see. I knew we'd screw up eventually if we kept going. Keep going until you fail. And again, this is something that I would definitely not recommend in a tournament. You want to minimize not going broke in general. And also, I bet your opponent's not going to call off wide enough. What should you jam here? Obviously, any king. Wants you to jam. The thing is, I guess it just has a lot of bluffs. Maybe it doesn't have a lot of bluffs. I don't know. This is dirty. Okay, so let's take a look here. I want to see spades, hearts, and diamonds. So here's the clubs. Those are the nuts. Diamonds are going all in like almost never. What about spades? Obviously almost never. What about hearts? There are a decent amount of hearts going all in. If you did have queen 2 of hearts, jack 2 of hearts, 10 2 of hearts, 9 3 of hearts. Ugh. All right. So say we do jam. What do they call with? Well, first off, anytime you see a GTO sim that has a range that looks like this, notice there's almost no combinations as played. Why? Because on the river, notice they really should not have a whole lot of this stuff to bet big. So on the flop, what happened here? On the flop, they should be betting a ton. But they checked. And we checked it back. On the turn, they should be betting some. But they checked. Wait, did they check? No, they bet 4.6. So notice here the 4.6 bet is not used very often. We're already down to a very tiny portion of their range. And when you see stuff like this, you got to realize the solver output's going to be really, really, really sensitive to exactly whatever it is doing. So this is a spot where I would take what the solver says with a grain of salt. And again, it's playing perfect good GTO, but this is not realistic for the real world, in my opinion. And on the river, I would have just called. Some of you want to look at how to play against a raise and a bunch of callers. All right, well, let's go to 60 big blinds deep. Say under the gun raises. Low jack calls. What do you do with aces? Re-raise. What about if you're in the cutoff? What do you do? Re-raise. What about on the button? Re-raise. What on the small blind? Re-raise. But big blind, re-raise. Against a raise and a call, re-raise. What about against a raise and a 3-bet? Re-raise. What about a raise and a 3-bet? Re-raise. 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 Okay, 60 big blinds deep, you always re-raise against a raise and a call. 40 big blinds deep. Similar thing. Let's say low jack raises. High jack calls. Re-raise. 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 Look, everybody. Poker's easy when it goes raise and call and you have the aces. You re-raise. Okay? If it goes raise, if you raise and somebody calls and somebody 3-bets, you re-raise. 25 big blinds deep. Do we ever slow play against a raise and a call? Let's say low jack raises, high jack calls. What do you think? Use your brain, make a prediction. The answer is no. You re-raise. What about on the button? Do we slow play? No. You re-raise. What about in the small blind? Re-raise. Big blind. Re-raise. 20 big blinds deep. Is that a thing? Low jack raises. Cutoff calls. Do we slow play the button? Oh, look, it sneaks in there 3% of the time. Don't worry about that. What about from the small blind? All in. Big blind, all in. So, as you see, multi-way against a raise and a call, or a raise and multiple callers, you re-raise in all scenarios with your aces. There's no merit in slow playing in these spots at all because the pot's already grown pretty big. What I wanted to look at is one more scenario where, let's say, folds around to the hijack. Let's do 25 big blinds deep. Hijack raises, cutoff folds, and we're on the button. Notice our aces calls about half the time. Let's go train this spot. So let's end our session. Played decently. We had that one mistake on the river, a few quote-unquote mistakes. Again, I wouldn't worry too much about those. I want the hijack to raise. I want to call on the button. 25 big blinds deep versus raise first in. Hand, I want to make sure we have aces. Click start. So here, the hijack's going to raise. We're on the button with aces. We're going to call every time, even though I know you should re-raise some of the time. Half the time-ish. Flop comes, jack 8-5. They bet. What do we do? This situation would be similar if we called the cutoff. Similar enough. Have you heard of a chat GPT poker bot? Well, it's clearly in the chat saying random stuff. All right, against big bets, always call. 99% call. Turn 3, they check. Should we bet? All right, this is where I, Jonathan Little, may struggle. I think we're supposed to bet 3.6, but it might check it back. I don't think it's going to bet bigger, but it might bet bigger. The reason is because notice the pot's already pretty big. 14 big blinds and we have 19, right? Ugh. I'm going to say check. 7% check, 91% bet small. Okay. At least it was not the least played option. All right, facing the river bet. Do we jam? What do you think? If you sign up for the Cyber Monday sale, we are giving away some coaching sessions randomly. You can use them whenever you want, within reason. If you come to me in like 10 years, maybe not. One thing you will see on the river, in spots like this, I think GTO with aces is to always shove. And again, you're going to have to use your brain in real life and ask yourself, will my opponent call it off with logical bluff catchers, like a jack? And I actually want to look at what they should be calling it off with. GTO jams 99% of the time. Let's go down here and look at it. Will the opponent call off logically as GTO would? Or will it play much tighter? If it'll play much tighter, then you, in turn, should not jam. So once we jam, what should they call with? Let's make this full so we can see. Will they call off any top pair and some tens? Will your opponent call with some tens? I don't know. That's up for you to decide. Will they call with ace-8 every once in a while if they have it? I don't know. It's up for you to decide. If your opponent will start folding out the tens, and maybe even fold out stuff like jack-9, well then obviously you have to be way more cautious. That said, in this spot, take a look at this range. What actually beats you? You beat kings, you beat queens, you beat ace, jack, king, jack, queen, jack. You lose to jack 10, jack 8 suited, jacks and tens, and pocket 8s and pocket 5s. Against that range is probably close. You can count the number of combinations. It's probably close even against that. So this might be a spot where even if your opponent does call off tighter than GTO, like say they fold every 10, it's still probably just a shove because they have a decent number of jacks. All right, next hand. They raise, we just call. You could, of course, 3-bet. Exploitatively, I, Jonathan, will call this every time. They bet big on the flop. Obviously, just call. On uncoordinated flops, you're definitely just calling. We might get a coordinated turn eventually, or flop eventually. They bet big on the 9 of hearts turn. We only have 19. So this is a spot where GTO will bluff some real junkers. If your opponent's going to bluff some real junkers, don't shove, because you want them in with the real junkers. If they will not bluff the junkers, you should probably shove. And I would say exploitatively, most people in the real world in this spot don't bluff nearly enough junkers. Let's see what it says. It might say shove, though. Call 83% of the time, because they're going to have some real junkers. Obviously, call the river. So what do we need them to be bluffing to really want to call the turn? And again, these are questions you want to be asking yourself whenever you are playing poker, whenever you're studying poker. You want to try to figure out what the opponent's doing. And you want to try to figure out how you should adjust to the real world. Monty says, the opponent's very pot committed. Not if they have nothing, they're not. Take a look at this. The flop is 10, 4, 3, turn 9 of hearts. King 5 of clubs and spades should be betting 8 big blinds on the turn. Same with King 6. King 7 does a little bit. Queen 8 for a gutter. Ace 3 of diamonds. Ace 2 for a gutter. Notice the opponent is betting with a lot of trash. Well, not a lot of trash, but some trash. And the nice thing about this spot is you're probably going to get paid by all the good hands on all rivers. Right? Notice any 10 or better is not folding on any river. Well, let's confirm that. Is that true? Can I check that here? Say they bet 8.6 and we call. Turns a king. They still just put their money in with everything. So they're like happy to value bet on all the rivers. So this is a spot where you should be calling the turn. He can only fold if he bluffs with random trash. Correct. That's what I'm trying to tell you. Exploitatively, if your opponent is not good, if your opponent's bad, and they do not bluff adequately with a lot of these King X and Queen X junkers, you in turn can jam more aggressively, right? But if they're not going to be betting King Queen and Queen Jack and Ace 8 and Ace 7 and King 5 suited and King 6 suited, if they're just checking and folding those, that makes their range way stronger, right? So as your opponent is worse in a weak type passive manner, when they blast a turn, I do agree they're pot committed and they're not folding. But hopefully that's common sense. If your opponent has a very good hand, you might as well get the money in immediately. Poker is really, really easy when you know what your opponent does wrong. The tough thing about poker is that you don't know what your opponent does wrong. Maybe your opponent takes every King 6 and bluffs them, in which case it would be a disaster to shove, right? So this is a spot where assuming you don't know what your opponent does, you want to play as close to GTO as you can, and we see GTO just calls. Let's do another one. And again, you can do this all day, every day, if you are a member of Peak GTO. Flop comes 10-4-2. Should we bet or check? Sorry, my wife's texting me. She wants me to do homework with the kids. All right, I think we're supposed to bet small. Maybe check, though. Let's do small bet. 75% bet small, 24% check. Turn to Jack of Hearts. Do we keep betting? I would presume yes. Let's go 5.8 so we can jam river. 94%, 5.8. This is a very common line you will see. When you call button, on the flop, they check. You often bet small with a medium-ish linear range, including races. Then on turn, you're going to be 2/3 potting it. You're going to find that the 2/3 pot is very, very, very often used in the spot so that you can reasonably set up a 2/3 pot river jam. Flop king 6-2. Let's check this one. Maybe you're supposed to bet. 27% check. I mean, I knew we were supposed to check here or bet more often than not, but let's explore the checking line. Turn, they check. I think we're supposed to go big. I like pot. 96% pot. Why are we potting it here but betting tiny in the other scenario? We are betting big on the turn here because we need to be able to set up stack to pot ratio so that we can jam the river. Notice now we have 16 big blinds. The pot's 19 now. If we bet tiny on the turn, the pot would have been like, I don't know, 7 or 8 or whatever it would have been. And we would not be able to get all the money in by the river. So we need to bet big on the turn, especially on this very dynamic turn where there's a straight draw and flush draw available, but no straight or flush yet. Spiritus, hello, welcome. On the river, they check. Can you jam on the king? What do you think? Of course you can. Easy all in. You may say, should we ever bet small on the river? No. In position on the river when you have pot or less, your options are all in or check. Do not bet small. Unless you're really trying to exploit your opponent who's especially bad. 6-5-4. Oh boy. 6-5-4. We maybe check this one too. I think I'm gonna go with check, but maybe bet small is fine. Maybe even 4 big blinds is fine. I think this is why we're supposed to probably mix the sizes a lot. Maybe like 7s should be betting bigger. If we do bet aces, I gotta presume it's using a smaller size. And you're gonna use bigger size with 7s. We'll take a look at this one. Let's go check, but whatever. 55% check, 44% bet. So, okay, makes sense. Turn, they check. Can we value bet? What do you think? I think we want to bet 4. Missed this one. Looks like our hand's not good enough. All right. Let's take a look at this one. 6-5-4. Interesting flop. Uh-oh. What happened here? Hijack raises. We call button. Big blind folds. Call. Raise. Call. Fold. Fold. Oh. We need to change this. All right. Hijack raises. We call. Big blind folds. Oh, here we go. Default to do 100 big blinds for some reason. All right. On the flop, they check. What should we do? Notice aces does some checking. Funny enough, I said if we are going to be using the bigger size, it'd be with something like 7s. I was wrong in that we use the bigger size some. Notice here we're using the 3.9, 15% of the time with 7s, which is negligible. So aces checks some, 7s bets basically every time. So we let it go check, check. Turn is a 2. They check again. So I thought we could value bet the aces, but it looks like that's just not necessary. Because look, notice we have no 3s, but it looks like aces is again a hand that just wants to keep the opponent in. I guess the opponent's range is so garbage. And you're instead betting for value with stuff like a6, king 6, 7s if you have it, 7-6, plus a lot of bluffs. Okay, cool. Check, check. Let's say it does go check, check. Let's say river's a jack. If they bet, do we call? If they bet tiny, I presume we're going to raise. Notice we do raise all in or pot. on a jack, even though a 3 is a straight, nobody really has it. If they bet bigger, notice they should use 3.9 sometimes. I think we still probably shove the aces, and we do. Okay? If you have any questions about the program, or if you see any perhaps errors, send us an email, support@pokercoaching.com. They have straights if it's live, LOL. Okay, as your opponent has more straights in their range, obviously raise less often. Again, common sense. Poker is so easy when you know what your opponents do wrong. If your opponent raises every single 3, they also have a whole lot of garbage, but if they have every single 3, don't go around raising nearly as often. Flop, they bet tiny. We do a lot of calling, a little bit of raising. They bet turn. Presume just call, 97%. If they're betting into you, just let them. Keep them in the pot with all their garbage. River 6, how much do we bet? What do you think? All in, half pot, or 2/3 pot? All in's more than pot, 1.3x pot. Obviously, we're not checking. So nobody really has a lot of 6s or 2s, so our hand is effectively the nuts. Anytime your hand's effectively the nuts, you typically just put the money in. All in, 84%, 2/3 pot, 14%. Typically on the river, when you're shallow stack and you have the aces, you put your money in. Jack 7-5, do we bet 2/3 here? I can be convinced 2/3 is best. Let's try it. 61%, 2/3 pot. Now, how did I, Jonathan Little, know to bet 2/3 pot on the Jack 7-5, 2 diamonds? Well, it's a very dynamic flop, meaning there is a straight and a flush draw available, but there's no straight or flush available. In spots like this, you don't do much. You do some small betting, but the hands that want to bet bigger are going to be hands that are almost always good but vulnerable. Notice aces, kings, queens, and ace-jack are very often using the bigger size. Okay? Let's do one more. I could do this all day. I said I wanted to get to 1900. Let's try to get to 1900. We're going to check it back on the ace 6-2. We have super duper nut. We block him hard. We're going to check it back. Turn is king. They check. We probably need to bet now. Let's go for 3.9, even though I kind of hate it. We go 3.9. Sometimes you should still check. 56% checks. Okay. Looks like you're supposed to slow play really, really hard. River queen. Can we jam? I would say no. Check, check. Good. Pocket aces. They raise. We call. King 9-9. They bet small. We call. Ooh, look, some raises here. That's because they're going to have a lot of queen jacks and stuff, I suppose. We make nut. Obviously call. Anytime we have the super nuts, obviously call. River, of course. They check. We go all in. Again, no small betting here. Nothing fancy. They raise preflop. We call. Look, we're almost there, 1900 already. They bet small on the flop. Easy call. That's cool we raise on the king 9-9, right? Because they have a lot of straight draws. Turn. They check. Do we bet small or bigger? I'm going to say small, but maybe we're supposed to check. Ugh, this is where they're going to take my ELO rating away from me. Look, we were almost there. All right. We need to bet this, I think. I think we want to go medium as much as I hate it. I'm going to go 8.6. Oh, I'm wrong. You're supposed to check every time. Disaster. Let's see. Literally check every time, huh? Oh, that was the wrong one. Check every time. Why? It's hard when your ranking gets high in an ELO setting because when you get it wrong, you lose a lot of points. So this is a spot where notice queens and jacks bet a lot. Kings bet a decent amount of the time. Ace-9 bets every time. I'm not going to fault myself too much for missing the aces here. This is a spot where, again, you have to be a little bit forgiving of yourself. Now, it's obviously wrong. Actually, when I'm learning, you need to check it back in the spot on this low paired board, I suppose, when it's relatively uncoordinated. But we got it wrong and we got punished. They bet flop. Just call. Again, you don't raise against big bets. What's my opinion on changing a playing style at different stakes? I think you should always take advantage of whatever your opponents do wrong. So figure out what they do wrong and then exploit them. Yeah, you got to realize aces does a lot of slow playing when the pot's already kind of big. I think we go bigger on this one. Notice 90% big bet. Well, 2/3 pot bet. They donk into us. Oh boy, you don't see a whole lot of donking. The opponent is donking perfectly. Let's make that clear. Oh, I don't even know what to do here. I have not experienced this spot in the solver at all. It's probably a very low frequency donk. I'm going to presume we jam. Yeah. They're going to take away more ELO points. So I know you do a lot of raising against small leads in general, in common spots, like when big blind leads on a board that's good for them, with your hands that are almost always good but vulnerable. I got to presume this hand's almost always good but vulnerable. Right? Ugh, I'm going to jam. It's probably wrong. All in, 61%. Notice, the heuristic, 1. You're going to find that very often, developing general rules for common scenarios, even if they are a little bit different, hold true. And a very common heuristic is when the opponent leads small. This thing keeps defaulting. Let's see. Why is it doing this? Let's try again. There we go. When they donk small, they're donking with a very linear-ish range. Notice, like I said, this is going to be a very infrequent play. 1% of the time. No wonder I haven't encountered it. It's a 1% thing. Look what they're leading with. Top pairs, 2 pairs, pairs and draws. Against this very infrequent strategy, again, this is something you're not going to run into very often. They bet tiny. We jam the aces a lot. King Queen's raising, King Jack's raising some, Jack 9 for the straights shoving, 9-8 for draws shoving, various flush draws are shoving. So cool. Glad we found it. Glad we got that one. They raise, we call. Can we get to 1900 so I can be done with this webinar, please? We're never going to get to leave. Bet big on this dynamic flop. Again, this is something you'll learn, right? Bet big on dynamic flops, bet small on uncoordinated flops. They bet flop, we call. Will we get there on this hand? If they check turn, do we bet? I don't know. They bet big on the turn, obviously call. No, you don't need to shove here. They're drawing dead. Dead enough. When I say dead, I don't mean dead like 0%. I mean dead like not a lot. Not enough. You want to keep them with their garbage. Ooh, do we raise on this one? Against the small bet. I think top set's going to always slow play. Call 99%. Good. On the turn, we're going to call every turn bet too. They check turn. Do we bet tiny or medium? Or do we check? Maybe this hand's good enough to slow play. Ugh, feels bad. Feels bad, but I think we're supposed to check. Check. 46%. Good enough for me. They bet river. Do we jam? Yes. In GTO world, I gotta presume it's a jam. Anytime your opponent bets really tiny on the river, you should be raising pretty aggressively. This hand's obviously good enough to raise against that range. In the real world, maybe you don't shove if your opponent is going to literally only bet tiny with flushes and marginal stuff and then fold all the marginal stuff, but this is easy all in. Ooh, I almost clicked 12.6. They tried to trick me. All in's down here. Oh, we are supposed to go 12.6. No. What? I guess because the pot's so small. Man, oh man, what a bummer. Again, if this is a mistake, it's like a forgivable mistake. I'm not so concerned with this. We do have some all ins, just not with aces. Looks like the flushes are what we need to be jamming. Suppose that makes sense, right? King Jack, huh? King Jack. With the Jack of spades, likes to rip it all in. Sure, GTO. Sure, GTO. All right, all right. Well, we're not going to get to 1900 today. We're going to be stuck at 1875. Unless I win a few in a row right here. Is this dynamic enough, or do we bet small? We're going to go big. All right, I got it wrong. We're supposed to check. Okay, that's going to be it for today. Before I let you go, let me tell you about the brand new course we just launched on pokercoaching.com. It is called Tournament Domination Insight from the Pros. I was just going through part of the content from Justin Saliba while I was at the gym, and it is excellent. Absolutely excellent. However, you cannot buy this course. Tournament Domination is not for sale, but if you sign up for Poker Coaching Premium during our Cyber Week sale, you will get free access to tournament domination for as long as you are a Poker Coaching Premium member. Here's all the coaches who made content for this course. Let's go through it very quickly because I have to go help my kids with homework. Chris Brewer, super duper crusher. He plays the biggest games in the world. He has a lot of content on how to play in very dicey, tricky scenarios that a lot of people screw up when there are big payout implications, when there's a lot of money on the line. His content is awesome in tournament domination. You do not want to miss it. Brock Wilson, Brock the Brain, discusses defending against aggression. He uses the GTO solver to go through all sorts of scenarios where it's hard to defend. He goes through why you should be defending quite often and discusses how to actually do it in a way that works out for you in the long run. A lot of people are far too weak, tight, and passive, and that results in them getting crushed. Justin Sliba, Poker Coaching Overlord, discusses increasing precision on the turn and river, where essentially he goes through and uses Peak to talk about very common scenarios and gives a lot of rules and heuristics for how to play specific spots so that you roughly know what to do in these scenarios. Like in that very weird spot when the opponent donk led, right? When they donk led on like that random 3 high card board, I'm like, oh, this doesn't happen very often. Sure enough, it didn't happen very often. But I knew when they bet small in that spot, you need to raise your hands that are almost always good but vulnerable. It's a great rule to have. And sure enough, even in this spot that's kind of abnormal, the solver did that because that is just good GTO poker. And Justin's section of tournament domination gives a lot of rules for these very, very, very common scenarios. Oh, hi, this is me. I have a section on preflop and postflop short stack strategies, as well as playing short stacked on the bubble. Shannon Shore, he goes through his entire $3,500 buy-in MGM main event final table. And, well, turns out when you go through every single spot, inevitably you'll find mistakes that you made. Shannon made some mistakes. He played a lot of spots great too. But I learned a lot because a lot of the mistakes Shannon made, I would have made as well. And probably you would have made too. So going through his final table in depth, every single hand he played, is incredibly educational and incredibly enlightening. And finally, Aram Zobian gives away a bunch of exploits to run deep in large field tournaments. When to overbluff, when to overfold. Should you be overfolding or underbluffing? Or should you be overbluffing or underbluffing? And finally, his top 5 exploits. Funny enough, I was talking to Aram at a recent event in the Poker Go studio, and I'm like, I don't know, man, you're giving away a lot in this one. You're basically telling everyone how you're going to crush them. He's like, yeah, well, I'll still find a way to beat him. Aram's an absolute crusher in the biggest games in the world. So, that is tournament domination. You can get Poker Coaching Premium, which includes all of this. You get access to tournament domination, the advanced tournament course, the advanced cash game course, a gigantic inner circle library where I coach a bunch of students for many, many, many hours. You get a subscription to Poker Go. Also, you get access to the tournament masterclass, the cash game masterclass, and a whole bunch of other stuff. Normally, it's $150 a month, but you can get a year for $649. $2 per day. $2 per day. I don't know how serious a lot of you are about poker. But if you want to get good at pretty much anything, it's going to cost you more than $2 a day. I've done my best to make Poker Coaching be the most in-depth site on No Limit Texas Hold'em, and also at a price that is affordable. Now look, I got to pay these coaches a ton of money, but I'll do my best to make it accessible to all of you. I think $2 a day is very reasonable. If you sign up longer, you get it even cheaper. Also, we just released Peak GTO. You saw us using the library today where we can go through all sorts of spots. Also, the trainer. We played around in the trainer in very specific spots. And, with the trainer, you can go through and select the same thing we did today, but with suited connectors or marginal high cards or whatever. You can also select the flop to be whatever you want the flop to be. You can make it very, very, very specific or keep it really open-ended. Say, give me a top 50% hand on the button. Let's run it. There's over 20 million spots that you can train and work hard to increase your rating. We also have the drill of the day. We didn't even talk about that today. But every day, me or one of my coaches goes through and uploads a new drill of the day where we discuss how to play a common spot or maybe an uncommon spot that you will encounter inevitably when you are playing poker. And we give as many logical rules we can to help you understand why the solver does what it does. Personally, I think this just might be the most beneficial part of the entire program because The goal is not to memorize what the solver does. The goal is to develop rules in your head so that you can be the solver. You can't memorize all the charts. There's 20 million of them or more, right? Can't memorize that. Instead, you have to learn why the solver does what it does. Again, going back to that spot where it made that weird lead. How did I know that you should be raising most of the time? Because we studied why the solver does what it does, and we explained that in the drill of the day. Also, you have your peak GTO ELO rating. Performing well in the trainer increases your ELO. As your rating gets really high, when you get it wrong, you lose a bunch of points. We saw that for me today. Disaster. Whenever you're getting started, though, if you get it wrong, it's a little bit more forgiving. You will ladder up. I strongly recommend you use peak GTO every single day to elevate your game to the highest level possible. So that's peak GTO, 1 month, $59. This is the cheapest we are ever going to make this. Some people ask to compare it to other various training programs out there. If you want access to all the content a lot of the other solvers are charging, it's about $300 per month. And they keep finding other ways to charge you more money. $59 a month to get access to peak GTO. If you want to sign up for an entire year, $499. Check it out, pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. If you sign up for Poker Coaching Premium and peak GTO, roughly $5 a day to get access to everything you need to crush No Limit Texas Hold'em. And if for any reason you do not think Poker Coaching or Peak is right for you, let us know within 1 month of signing up, and we will give you all of your money back. This is not a cash grab. I'm here for the long run. If I do not help you get good at poker, we do not want or deserve your money. So check it out at pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Thank you very much for being here. I wish you all the best of luck. I know December's a holiday time. You don't get to go and travel and play poker as much as you may want to, but you can study. Now is the best time to get ready. If you're in Vegas for the win events, good luck. If you're in the Bahamas, make sure you say hi and try to not take all my money. Well, you can try, but that'll be okay. Good luck in your games. Have fun. Have a great holiday season. Thanks again to each and every one of you for being here. Click the like and subscribe button. Check out pokercoaching.com/cyberweek. And I'll talk to you next time.